It is time to talk some more self-pub. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads. And as always, guys, I am Andrew. And today it is time for my second indie showcase here for you. Because I've been reading a lot of self-pub here with the Indie Accords readathon that has been going on. I have read a lot, and I mean a lot of self-pub. But I am kind of wanting to talk about 3 titles here with you all today. But before we get into that, make sure you are liking and subscribing so you can get regular updates for when I put out new content, because I drop that stuff twice a week. And guys, I really only own one of these physically, which I'm hoping to remedy that, specifically with our first title here, that is digital. And I got this one on audio because I really enjoy the narrator, and that is the fantastically underwhelming epic of a dead wizard and an average bard. Now, if you were looking at my Goodreads rating on this, I actually gave this a 3.5 out of 5. Realistically, this is a 4 out of 5 read, but my expectations were wrong. At the start of the month, I wanted to reach for a book that was very lighthearted, very kind of satirical, and with a title like the fantastically underwhelming epic of a dead wizard and an average bard, which is just an incredible mouthful that's kind of very tongue-in-cheek and kind of imparts this thought that you're going to be getting this very silly story. And that's not what this is. And so I feel like I talked this a half star just off the title alone, because when you reach for a book, you have an expectation. And with a title like that, I expected something very funny. Now, this book is funny. It has a funny character. And when his humor hits, it hits very hard. However, that humor is only in maybe 20% of the book, period. Everything else is just epic fantasy, and it's got a lot of emotional stakes here within this story. And so when I started reading this, I didn't get, I had an expectation I was getting a funny story, and instead I got epic fantasy. So this is one I do want to revisit and read again. Hopefully I want to read this one physically. I do need to get the physical book, which I will be doing here sometime soon. But basically, this story, we follow 3 characters: Kendrith, George, and Samantia. George is our average bard, Samantia is our dead wizard, and Kendrith is just kind of this mercenary that they meet near the beginning of the story that kind of shepherds them through and helps George grow and things of that nature. My critiques here are also kind of with the structure of the book, and that's where the other full star is missing for me. So basically, this is, let me clarify, probably a 4 out of 5, but I rated it 3.5 out of 5 because, I had an expectation that wasn't met. But basically, when we meet George, George is looking for a mythical place where wishes can be granted. He's got this story that he has been grown up with, that he and his sister cherished. His sister has since then died tragically, and he is trying to bring her back. And so he is on this quest to go off and find his sister, or place a wish where he can get her back. In there, basically, at the beginning of the story, he approaches some wrong people. These mercenaries want to rob him, so then he hires Kendrith. And basically, Kendrith is like, cool, I'll get you to where you need to go, or at least I'll get you through this magical forest where we can then, go throughout you can then go through your journey. After that, we find out that George has a talking skull, and this is our dead wizard, Samantia. Now, Samantia is hilarious in this current timeline. And what I mean by this current timeline is we get these characters' stories through basically full chapters where we time jump back. And Samantia's story takes place 1,000 years in the past, where he's, of course, not dead. And then George's takes place a little bit back, same with Kendrith, but these are only like a decade or like 5 years prior. And we get their backstory filled out this way. Structurally, it's a little bit odd because we'll basically go from a current timeline to a flashback for one character to a flashback of another character. And it's very structurally kind of jarring, I would say, a little bit. But when it works, it works. And overall, the story is fantastic. And definitely, I want to read more by Kian Ardalan. This one is... he's an author, I think, and is going to put out some very special work as he continues to write. Now, next up, let's talk Mage, Errant by John Bierce. And this is another one that I only own on audio However, this is a kind of YA progression fantasy that people have been telling me that I needed to read, and I can kind of see why. Now, I read the first two, but we're only going to be talking about the first one because I enjoyed book one more than I enjoyed book two. This follows Hugh of Emberlyn, and let's just get my rating out of the way. I gave this a 4 out of 5. Basically, Hugh is this very quiet, very reserved mage apprentice in this wizarding school, or I guess I should say mage school. And essentially, Hugh is basically, he feels worthless. He can't really do magic reliably. Like his magic just kind of goes everywhere. And there's a few students like this within this mage school. And basically what ends up happening is there comes a time in the school year where, he's kind of been ostracized, he's bullied, he hides from people, and then all of a sudden it comes time for people to do their apprenticeships. I can say that word. And this is Alustin, who he finds in the school library. He is a library mage errant. And basically, Alustin is just kind of awesome. And part of he almost reminds me of like Ethan Aurelius from the Cradle series. And basically, Alustin takes Hugh and 3 other students who have deficiencies, where basically one of these students has tattoos tattooed onto them that interfere with their magical abilities, because these are magic tattoos that are supposed to be enhancers for one type of magic that this person's entire family had, only to realize that this person doesn't have that affinity for magic, and thus there has to be a workaround. And we find out, Hugh has magic. It's just the way that Hugh has magic interferes with the way that people would normally do magic. And so we kind of go through this almost like Harry Potter style thing where, we're in a magical school, but this is more like dark academia because, there's danger and stuff like that. It kind of flashed me back to Drew Hayes' Superpowered series as well. That's more superhero college. But, they go through these tests and these exams that are dangerous where people have to fight each other and compete against each other. So I just really enjoyed this series. I thought it was fun. It was interesting. He was a little bit too reserved for my taste. It takes a couple books for him to start coming out of his shell. I'm hoping by the time I read the 3rd book that, Hugh is finally willing to embrace that, he's not worthless. He does have value. He does have friends. This is very much a found family style story, with Hugh struggling to kind of accept that he does have friends. There are people that care about him. He does have worth. So this story does hit those beats, and it does it very well. Now let's talk about Rance D. Denton's His Ragged Company. Let's get in on this cover. This book is another, I think I give this one 4.5 out of 5. Now this is a fantasy western, and I have recently discovered a love for the fantasy western genre. And guys, this is awesome. Basically, we follow Elias Faust. He is the marshal of, I think it's Black Peak. And basically, it's just a standard western. I think it's in Texas or something like that. It's out in the Wild West. This takes place in our world, but then something's a little bit off. And basically, when this story starts, it is just it's just a western, excuse me. And then there's this little hints that oh, something's off here. Something's off here. And then I liken the way that the fantasy elements get introduced to a tsunami. Essentially. With a tsunami, they say if you just see the water on the beach disappear, it just all of a sudden just retreats, you should probably start running. And by then it's probably already too late. And then the tsunami just comes crashing in. And you just get all of these fantasy elements within this story. It just floods you over. And then it kind of switches from Western to fantasy, where Elias, even our main character, doesn't quite understand what's going on. And so you, the reader, can kind of sometimes feel a little bit confused by the fantasy elements. But it really, really works. This is one that I listened to on audio because the author gifted me. He's like, hey, thank you for buying my book. I really enjoy the narrator. Let me know what you think. The narrator's amazing. His southern drawl that he does for Elias is amazing. Elias also has a deputy in the name of Cicero. He's this actor who's on the run. And when we first meet Cicero, he gets locked up for theft because he robbed somebody in, I think, Alabama or something like that, and fled to Texas with $900 of this dude's money. He was just like, hey, you've been stealing from the people. I'm gonna take your money, and he takes off. And he's just an amazing kind of just partner for Elias. I absolutely love this story. Basically, we just watch. It almost feels like a series of novellas that have been stitched kind of together into this cohesive story full of fantasy of just Elias wants to do the right thing. He upholds the law. He stands for what's right. He is the Marshal of Black Peak. But as we know in the Wild West, that's not how things always work. You know, the mayor has got his grubby things in. He put Elias in power. He's like, hey, at times he's like, hey, you're working against my best interests. And Elias is like, great, I don't really care about your best interests. I'm here to uphold the law. That's what you hired me to do. And that's what I'm going to do. Also, I mean, I can't tell you how much I love this physical copy. Like, look at this. With this guy back here, we've got Elias with his 6-shooter up. And, I mean, the back of this book is just awesome. The spine is gorgeous. Like, this is one of the most beautiful physical copies that I own. Guys, I highly recommend this book, as well as pretty much everything that I've talked about here today. That said, guys, I will probably have another one of these once I read more self-pub this month, so you can expect another one of these probably next week or the week after. That said, let me know in the comments down below, have you been reading a lot of good self-pub this month? Please let me know, because I'm always on the hunt for a new indie read. That said, guys, that's all I've really got here for you today. Before we head out, make sure you're liking, subscribing, hitting that Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And as always, till next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.